This guy Charlie shows up, the guy who I had recently become friends with, and I don't know why he had been by Nicole's house, but it told me you wouldn't believe what's going on over there.
Well, hello. Welcome back to Life with Dr. Trish, where we discuss life stories, family backgrounds, and ancestry, and have conversations about so much more. I'm Dr. Trish Varner. I have a PhD in general psychology, and I've always been interested in DNA and experiences that shape us as people. I know it's taken a while for me to get part 3 of the OJ Simpson series out, y'all. I have posted on my community tab and on my Instagram and TikTok accounts about what's been going on in the background. You can follow me on Instagram at LifeWithDrTrish and on TikTok at Dr. Trish Varner. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on the notification bell so you can always know when I post new content. All right, if you have not yet seen parts 1 and 2 of my OJ Simpson series, I highly encourage you to go watch those episodes. You can find them under my videos tab and also in the Story Life playlist. Part 1 provides an overview of OJ's childhood background and family tree. We discovered OJ had a relative with an eerily similar past. In part 2, I discussed the events that led up to the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. In today's episode, I will be wrapping up the series. I will go through a list of additional suspects and their potential motives, and will also share my opinion about if I believe OJ did it or not. So let's jump right in. Okay, so in episode 2, I mentioned Norman Pardo. Norman was OJ Simpson's former business manager. From what I recall in my research a few months ago, Norman met OJ after OJ was declared not guilty of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. And by the way, y'all, I will refer to Norman sometimes as Norman and sometimes as Pardo. Just know he is the same person. So Pardo was responsible for helping negotiate business deals for Simpson. According to Pardo, he and Simpson became good friends and OJ would often confide in him. They later had a fallout, y'all, before Simpson passed away due to Pardo's claims that Simpson worked with an accomplice to commit the murders. So, why would Pardo say this if it wasn't true? Well, Pardo has allegedly made money off these claims. He's appeared on major TV networks, he's written books, he's done documentaries, has participated on very popular podcasts. He also is considered a producer and director. Some could say that he's very invested in pushing these theories because it's profitable for him. Let's look at Norman Pardo's theories. Norman's belief is OJ participated, but he had an accomplice. However, there are some conflicting information in his theories. To start with, some reports say Norman knew OJ very well, while in some of the interviews Norman did, he specifically said they had a 90% professional relationship. Pardo said he didn't believe OJ was the jealous type as he saw him share his girlfriends with his friends. I do believe OJ was in open relationships with his women, as that is what my research also indicated, even with his relationship with Nicole. However, I'm hesitant to believe he wasn't a jealous person, at least with Nicole. Remember the 911 recording from part 2 where OJ broke into Nicole's house? That is indicative of very jealous, obsessed, domineering behavior. Anyway, Norman Pardo believes that either OJ or Robert Kardashian hired a man named Glenn Rogers, a convicted serial killer, to kill Nicole. Allegedly, Glenn Rogers' son or brother claimed that Robert Kardashian set it up. So, who is Glenn Rogers? He is a lifelong criminal and is currently on death row. He was known as the Casanova Killer and was convicted of killing 2 women. However, he is suspected of killing several other women and an elderly man whose identity he later assumed. Rogers confessed, y'all, to killing 70 people, but later recanted that confession. So, how did Glenn Rogers become an unofficial suspect in the OJ Simpson case? Rogers is suspected of killing a 71-year-old man named Mark Peters in Kentucky. Peters was found tied to a chair in a cabin owned by Glenn Rogers' family. Rogers' brother, Clay, led police to the cabin where the body was discovered. Rogers' brother is the same one who also told police that Rogers had confessed to him that he killed Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. Rogers also told the police that he killed Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. So why wasn't he arrested, y'all? Well, according to Rogers, he was hired by OJ Simpson to recover some earrings from Nicole and was instructed to kill her if he had to. Rogers' brother Clay said Robert Kardashian is the one who set everything up per OJ Simpson's direction. After Glenn Rogers took on the identity of Mark Peters, the man he was suspected of killing in Kentucky, he allegedly moved to California and worked under the name Mark Peters, even using his social security number. According to Glenn Rogers' family, Glenn allegedly worked for Nicole Simpson in some capacity, most likely doing work on her home under the name of Mark Peters. Remember, that was the guy he's suspected of killing. According to Rogers' family, he informed them that he had been working for Nicole in 1994. The Rogers family also claimed that Glenn Rogers made verbal threats about Nicole Simpson to them. According to Norman Pardo, OJ's former business manager, Glenn Rogers allegedly was hired by Robert Kardashian and OJ to keep tabs on Nicole and her dealings with drugs. Pardo does not believe they initially planned to kill Nicole or Ron. He believes it was supposed to be some sort of shakedown due to the drugs Nicole was allegedly involved in. Pardo believes OJ went with Glenn Rogers that night to Nicole's house at the same time that Ron Goldman was there. Pardo theorizes that OJ confronted Ron and then Ron cut OJ with a knife, which is how OJ's drops of blood were at the crime scene. Pardo believes that Glenn Rogers then got the knife away from Ron and killed Ron with it. Pardo also believes OJ thought Ron Goldman was Nicole's drug supplier. There were some rumors that OJ was being threatened by some big-name drug dealers to pay the debts that Nicole owed. Anyway, OJ was not happy about that, so he was having Nicole's home watched to see if he could put an end to her alleged drug dealings. Pardo believes that when OJ confronted Ron about the drug situation, Ron fought back and stabbed OJ with the knife. According to Pardo's theories, Glenn then jumped in and killed Ron. Remember, Glenn Rogers is the serial killer. Several people believe there was more than one man who confronted Ron that night. Ron was young and fit. Some believe he had a karate black belt. Others dispute that, though. OJ at the time of the killings was out of shape and had arthritis, something that has also been disputed by some people. Some people believe Ron could have handled OJ alone. Glenn Rogers, though, was a different story. He had already killed, according to him, several people by that point. Allegedly, there was also evidence at the crime scene that indicated more than one perpetrator. The blood under Nicole's fingernails didn't match OJ nor Ron. Blood found on Ron's thigh did not match Ron, OJ, nor Nicole. A knife was found with blood that matched the blood under Nicole's fingernails. There were fingerprints and palm prints at the crime scene that did not match OJ, Nicole, nor Ron. There were also shoe patterns that could indicate more than one person. In addition, there were Caucasian hairs on one of the gloves that did not match the victims. There also allegedly was a black cap found with hair in it that did not match OJ's hair. There were drops of OJ's blood leading away from the crime scene, but there were not large amounts of OJ's blood on the crime scene, on the path, in the Bronco, nor in his house, and OJ had very light, almost white carpet. These arguments were also presented by OJ's lawyers during the trial. These arguments definitely helped to create doubt in the minds of the jurors. Pardo believes that OJ ran from the crime scene, bleeding from his finger, leaving Glenn Rogers there with Ron and Nicole. According to Pardo, Glenn Rogers said he is the one that threw the bloody glove over OJ's fence because he was mad OJ left him at the crime scene and didn't pay him. Rogers then allegedly went back to Nicole's house. He told Nicole he had some cocaine to get her to come to the door, and then killed her and took the money and jewelry she came outside with. Rogers also allegedly gave his mother an angel pendant that he had stolen from Nicole. Remember, this is Norman Pardo's theory. Glenn Rogers also confessed to the police, but they did not believe his story, and investigators ruled him out as a suspect. Glenn Rogers is known to be a liar, though. He also confessed to other killings and recanted those as well. Could it have possibly happened the way Pardo said, though? Perhaps. OJ failed a lie detector test, but that's not uncommon when a suspect has knowledge of the crime, regardless if he didn't actually commit the murders. Robert Kardashian, who did not have a legal law license at the time of the murders, reinstated his law license so that he could help defend OJ at his trial. But during the trial, Kardashian didn't actively argue the case, y'all. He sat with the attorneys but was not involved much in the trial. So some people believe he reinstated his law license so that he wouldn't have to testify against OJ. The idea behind that is Robert Kardashian, according to Norman Pardo, allegedly had an involvement in hiring Glenn Rogers to stalk Nicole. Again, these are Norman Pardo's theories, not mine. Okay, let's move on to the next suspect. In the If I Did It, Confessions of the Killer book, OJ allegedly references a character named Charlie who went with him to Nicole's house. This story was allegedly hypothetical, but there were some correlations between Charlie and Glenn Rogers. However, according to Pardo and others, OJ had no involvement in writing that book. At the time the book was written, OJ was near bankrupt and struggling to financially survive. According to Pardo, OJ was paid in cash for his agreement to be included in the book so that the Goldman family could not have access to any of that money due to the civil lawsuit they had won against OJ. Anyway, in the hypothetical story, OJ says he went to Nicole's house with Charlie. Early in the book and in interviews, OJ said he had real concerns about drugs being around his kids. However, he also described a tumultuous on and off again relationship with Nicole, even up to days before she was murdered. Although OJ hated to be called a jealous person, he definitely portrayed himself during interviews as being jealous of Nicole and her relationship with others, including the alleged relationship Nicole had with OJ's friend, Marcus Allen. OJ writes in the book and discusses in interviews that the day of the murder at his daughter's dance recital, he didn't like what Nicole was wearing and thought she was trying to get attention from younger guys. He also said a friend approached him and said Nicole was living a questionable life around his kids, which he said upset him. Okay, so this is OJ's hypothetical account of the murders with Charlie. He said Charlie, who was a new friend, came by his house to give him an account of what had been going on at Nicole's house. OJ and Charlie jumped in the Bronco and headed to Nicole's house. OJ put on a black cap and gloves. He also kept a knife under the seat of his Bronco. He said he believed Charlie took the knife. OJ and Charlie arrive at Nicole's house, and OJ sees Nicole has lit candles and has music playing, and then a guy shows up, Ron Goldman. OJ said he didn't recognize the guy. He confronts the guy, who was Ron, and they start arguing. OJ said it got loud, so Nicole comes out the house. OJ starts arguing with Nicole about why she has Ron at the house. OJ had already said he was irritated by the events that happened earlier in the day and the events that happened over the previous 2 weeks that led up to the day of the killings. Nicole had broken up with him. She returned his jewelry. She told her friends and family she was done. Also, OJ wasn't invited to the family dinner after the dance recital. OJ also didn't like what Nicole was wearing at the recital. He was upset about her sleeping with his friend and had trouble, letting that go. Another friend told him at the recital that Nicole was into stuff. OJ felt a sense of ownership over Nicole's house since he paid for it. So OJ goes on and tells the account of what happens, the hypothetical account. According to OJ, Nicole fell and hurt herself. And then Ron jumps in to defend her with some sort of karate move. OJ said this upset him, so he grabbed the knife from Charlie. OJ then said he blacked out and doesn't remember anything until he came back to awareness and he saw blood everywhere. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch OJ Simpson, The Lost Confession, Fox interview, full documentary 2018. Start at 46 minutes in and go through 51 minutes 30 seconds. Now, OJ's hypothetical confession fits what the coroner says happened, except for the coroner said Nicole did not fall. She was hit over the head with the handle of the knife before being stabbed 4 times in the neck while on the ground. According to the coroner, Ron ran over to defend Nicole and then was stabbed in the face 5 times with the knife before having his throat slit. Ron then broke loose and tried to run, but he was blocked by a fence. So the perpetrator caught him again and stabbed Ron in his abdomen. Ron tried to defend himself with his hands, which is how he got his defense wounds. Nicole is then pulled by her hair and her throat is also cut. Then the killer goes back to Ron and continues to stab him. It was definite overkill, which usually indicates someone with a passionate motive, someone the victim knows well, like a spouse or ex-spouse. Could someone else other than OJ have a motive to commit that overkill? Let's go back to Glenn Rogers, the convicted serial killer, for a minute. Although Rogers confessed to killing 70 people, which he later recanted, he was only convicted of killing 2 people, but he is suspected of killing at least 5. Rogers did not have a standard way of killing his victims. He seemed to act out of rage or greed. Some of his victims were strangled, some were stabbed. Do I believe Glenn Rogers was deranged enough to stab Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman to death? Yeah. But I still can't get past OJ's hypothetical confession, facial expressions, body movements, and statements he made during his interview about the hypothetical confession. Could Glenn Rogers have been the hypothetical Charlie? Maybe. Some people even believe that Robert Kardashian was the hypothetical Charlie. Remember, Charlie is the one that OJ mentions in the book, who supposedly went with him to confront Nicole at her house. I personally believe Charlie was a made-up person that combined several real people and events into one. For instance, If you follow Pardo's theory about the involvement of Robert Kardashian, then you can perhaps see how Charlie advised OJ not to go over to Nicole's house with a knife. You can perhaps also see how a person such as Glenn Rogers was asked to monitor Nicole. And perhaps you could see how someone such as OJ's friend at the recital advised OJ of Nicole's reckless behavior at her house. All of these situations and individuals seem to have been rolled into one character, Charlie, in OJ's mind. I'm just hypothesizing here, y'all. So, we have discussed Robert Kardashian's rumored involvement, Glenn Rogers' confessed involvement, and the hypothetical involvement of Charlie that OJ presented. I'm only going to discuss one additional suspect. I know those who have been following this case for years may be aware of others. However, I'm only bringing up the most talked about suspects' theories from my research. This case can be talked about and has been talked about for years, but I think I have seen enough now to form my own opinion, which I will share at the end of this video. But first, let's talk about the last suspect I will discuss in this video, OJ Simpson's son, Jason Simpson. Jason Simpson is OJ's son with his first wife, Marguerite. Jason was 24 and working as a chef at the time of the murders. Jason allegedly had a rage disorder for which he was taking medication, but he allegedly was off his meds at the time of the murders. When Jason was a teenager, he allegedly experimented with drugs. He also lived with OJ and Nicole off and on. Some say Nicole had a good relationship with OJ's children from his first marriage. However, could Jason have had some hidden animosity towards his stepmother? Nicole did start dating his dad while OJ was still married to Jason's mom, who was pregnant at the time with Jason's younger sister, Erin. Erin later drowned as a toddler. OJ divorced Marguerite after starting his affair with Nicole. OJ and Nicole went on to have 2 children together, Sydney and Justin. Jason and his sister Arnell are several years older than Sydney and Justin. I did not find any real evidence that showed serious problems in the step-family dynamic, at least not enough to show a motive for murder. However, Private Detective William Deere has been convinced for over 30 years that Jason Simpson was the real killer. Jason was never considered a suspect by police, but ironically, the day after the murders, OJ allegedly sought a lawyer for Jason. The question becomes, why would Jason need a lawyer? So here is an overview of William Deere's theory that Jason Simpson committed the crimes. Jason, who had anger issues and was off his meds, was upset about how his dad was treated by Nicole and her family at Sydney's dance recital. Remember, OJ and Nicole weren't on the best of terms at this point. Nicole didn't want anything else to do with OJ. Nicole and her family also didn't invite OJ, and I assume OJ's older children as well, to the family dinner after the recital. OJ, who was already upset that day, may have expressed his thoughts to his son, Jason. Jason allegedly had mental health issues. He allegedly was arrested 4 times and was sentenced to 2 years probation for assaulting his employer and threatening him with a knife. He also allegedly attacked and threatened girlfriends with a knife. He also allegedly checked into a mental hospital a few months before the murders, allegedly because he was hearing voices. He supposedly had stopped taking his medication 2 months before the murders. William Deers believes Jason went to Nicole's house to confront her about how she was treating his father. Deers further theorizes that Jason killed Nicole and Ron and then returned to his father's house in a black Jeep, which they say the limo driver, Alan Park, saw in the driveway when he first arrived to pick OJ up to take him to the airport. OJ and Jason then allegedly drove back to the crime scene in OJ's white Bronco. OJ wore black gloves to the crime scene, but later tossed them when he realized they were wet, according to this theory. At some point, OJ cut his finger while at the crime scene, which is how his drops of blood were at the scene. Deers also presented some evidence that he says also points to Jason as the killer. The blood under Nicole's nails did not belong to OJ nor Ron. Could it have been Jason's blood? There was a black knit cap found with afro hair in it that did not match OJ's hair. The cap also had dog hairs in it. There's a picture of Jason wearing a black knit cap with his dog right next to him. OJ did not have any bruising on his body or hands other than the one cut on his finger. Deers also said there were witnesses that saw several bruises on Jason's arms right after the murders. Jason also allegedly gave conflicting stories about his whereabouts during the time of the murders. Jason allegedly changed his time card at work to show he was working during the time of the murders. Deers also claims to have found the murder weapon inside a storage unit. Again, the police never considered Jason a suspect. So I think this video is long enough, so I will now close it out with my opinion. Do I think OJ Simpson killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman? This whole case was messy. I do believe OJ was guilty, y'all. Even if he wasn't the one who actually stabbed them to death, he was still guilty because he was way too involved from start to finish. This is why I believe he failed the lie detector test. He knew he was guilty. He believed he caused her death, their deaths, even though he denied it all the way to his grave. I 100% believe OJ abused Nicole. I think the evidence is clear on that. He was possessive, he was controlling, there was an unfair power dynamic in their relationship. Remember, she was only 18 when they met and he was 30. He was rich and famous. She worked as a waitress in a restaurant. I researched this case for several weeks, and in every video I saw where OJ talked about Nicole, he indicated a power dynamic. For instance, there was the incident where he took a bat to her car, and the excuse he gave was that he bought her that car, so he could do with it what he wanted. OJ, I believe, was a narcissist. And that's my opinion, y'all. And he was clueless regarding certain truths around him. I think he really believed that he did no wrong to Nicole. Just like OJ believed he could do anything he wanted to Nicole's car because he bought it, I believe he also had the same mindset when it came to her home and even perhaps to Nicole herself. Remember, OJ broke into Nicole's home and terrorized her during that 911 call. He bought her that home. He believed he could do with it what he wanted. I also think he believed he made Nicole who she was, so he felt he could do with her what he wanted. Nicole, her house, and her car were OJ's possessions, according to his mind. I believe OJ was angry and offended the day of the recital. He perhaps felt used by Nicole and how dare she treat him like that after all he did for her. That could be his mindset. I believe that was his mindset. Nicole reaped the rewards of being a young woman who married a rich man who gave her everything. She paid the ultimate price for it, though. I'm not saying she deserved to die. She did, unfortunately, play with fire, and it's very sad how it all ended. On the night of the murders, I believe OJ shared his feelings of betrayal with someone. Perhaps he shared with Glenn Rogers and or his son Jason. I don't believe OJ kept those thoughts to himself, though. Narcissistic people such as OJ, in my opinion, tend to want to vent and get people on their side. They don't see their wrongs, so they assume everyone else agrees with them. I do believe OJ may have taken someone with him to Nicole's house that night. I don't know if it was Glenn Rogers or Jason Simpson or someone else. Remember the crime OJ was convicted of, where he committed the armed robbery to get his sports memorabilia back? He didn't go there alone. He took a group with him, y'all. Because people like OJ need validation. They feed off of it. It's their fuel. They need someone in their corner telling them they are right and justified. So, I do believe that OJ most likely went to Nicole's house with at least one other person. So, why didn't he snitch on them? Well, it wouldn't have helped him. He was still guilty. Everyone there would have been charged with murder. Confessing that someone else was at the crime scene would then mean admitting his part in the crime, which OJ's ego could not allow. Image meant everything to OJ, all the way to the day he died. He needed people to see him in a good light. Refusing to admit any part in the murders meant to him that he could still hold on to the delusion that people loved him. It was worth it for him. Do I believe the jury got it wrong? No. I believe they took the evidence presented to them and made the decision from that. I think the prosecution made a mistake by not pursuing the possibility of an accomplice. The evidence indicated that there may have been an accomplice, and the prosecution was not willing to address it. Combine that with the racial tensions that existed during the time and the evidence the defense team presented that pointed towards a racist LAPD, and you get a recipe for doubt. The jury did not trust the prosecution. Yes, I do believe there was overwhelming evidence to prove OJ was on the scene. However, the prosecution did not do a sufficient job in convincing the jury that OJ alone did the crime. The jury expected to see more of OJ's blood on the scene. They saw the prosecution present that the glove did not fit. There were discussions of DNA that did not match. There were questions about the timeline that didn't seem to fit. Then there was Mark Furman and the LAPD and their history of racism. There was no going back after that. The jury had doubt and they were not going to convict. With all that said, I feel OJ was guilty. I do not feel it was premeditated. I believe he acted on emotion. Whether or not he had someone there with him, it doesn't matter when measuring his guilt. So, there it is, y'all. I believe OJ was guilty. That is my opinion after studying this case for several weeks. I am now ready to move on from this case. But leave me your comments and let me know what you think. Are you aware of other potential suspects or theories? Leave me a comment and let me know, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.